Hey there, everyone. Travel with us to the ancient biblical town where David danced out of his clothes, king, grew up, and got poured all over with oil. Jonathan has the story. Here's Johnny.
Thank you, Cynthia. The biblical town of Ziklag was a town in Negev where King David planned his counteroffensive against King Saul and other enemies of the Philistines with whom he was in exile. And that's in Samuel 27 through 31, if you're interested. Hence, Ziklag's the 501c3 organization, which was founded in 2017 after the election. Mission is to implement the Seven Mountains Mandate, basically a treasonous plan that was created in 1975 with a purported message from God delivered to evangelicals Lauren Cunningham, Bill Bright, and Francis Schaeffer, ordering them to invade the seven spheres of society identified as family, religion, education, media, entertainment, business, and government. This is in order to help bring about the end of days. The organization is made up of about 150 religious people whose net worth is required to be over 25 million US dollars. They had a war chest of 12 million as of 2022, but they have deep pockets to fund from their members. Ziklag, if they burn through their admittedly small fund compared to other anti-American pressure groups, Ziklag's goal is to affect elections to create a Christian nationalist state. Electing Christian nationalists is part of the goal, as is voter suppression and disenfranchisement of large swaths of Democrats, basically. But, colored people, poor people, etc. The story is from The Friendly Atheist by Hemant Mehta on July 16th, 2024. And Cynthia?
Thank you, Jonathan. Well, I'm wondering if we're going to go ahead and talk about King David was listening. No, that was King Jesus was listening. King David danced out of his clothing because he was very happy that the Ark of the Covenant came back to Israel after he killed a lot of people. Yes, I said killed. That would be KILLT. So, Eli, how does this group, Ziklag, relate its mission to the biblical story of David and Ziklag?
It just seems so out of place. It seems unrealistic. Their language is so sinister. Like they say, they're locked in a terrible conflict with the powers of darkness. And it's not the description that I find scary. It's the fact that people actually believe that and think that way. When I hear the forces of darkness, I think of the Uruk-hai of Anatar, fucking Lord Sauron, the Lord of the Rings. That's the sort of imagery that I think of when I hear of the forces of darkness. And they think that not being a Christian, and specifically not being a Christian nationalist, is the same as being a Sith Lord. And they want to put this image of evil and treachery into the minds of voters just to scare them into voting, basically, I think.
I would just make a real quick comment that
yes,
I think
ahead,
more
John.
of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. But
Yeah. Gentlemen, it's too early for Halloween, but I was going to say that in my opinion, no, it's never too early, right? In my opinion, I personally feel that the Sith Lords got a bad name. They got a bad rap. Just completely misunderstood. And I have a feeling that the Ziklag group is maybe a little bit misunderstood. John, what about you, Scott? Do you think that Ziklag is misunderstood, or are they as cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs as they seem?
I don't get the impression that they're misunderstood. I think the problem is that we totally see what's happening here. I mean, the problem, I would imagine that if they were being misunderstood, then that would be on the plus side for them. I mean, because it's really obvious what's going on here. It's their they're manipulating people by drawing on these religious recommendations or these religious connections and encouraging, pushing things in a particular direction. We talked about the seven mountains, right? There's all these different areas of society that they want to inject themselves into, and it's really kind of underhanded. And so I think to answer your question, I think well, I don't know, maybe I could be getting it wrong. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but for me, it seems pretty clear. It seems pretty clear what they're doing. And, they're holding up the Bible and they want to, be part of people's lives in that way. And I don't know, it doesn't seem too kosher to me. I don't know, that's probably a misuse of that word. It's not too, not on the up and up. Let me put it that way.
I would conjecture that up and up is actually down and downer. But and even like in the midst of me being, a bit hyperbolic with the cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs things, when we hear about some of the rhetoric that groups like this, like the Ziklag group, says in order to basically prop up their position, it does sound kind of nutsy, right? It sounds pretty nutsy. But at the same time, as we have covered over and over again with these Christian nationalists or Christo-fascist groups, it's really about seizing and holding on to political power. So, Jonathan, I'm coming back to you because I believe that you mentioned this earlier about how much money does the Ziklag group currently have in its assets?
As of 2022, they had $12 million, which sounds like a small amount of money for people who are dealing in tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. However, these people are very specific about they fund several groups that are bigger and have much more of an impact, like Turning Point USA, and there's one other that slips my mind at the moment, that are truly extremist right-wing groups who pour money into campaigns for basically extreme right-wing, authoritarian candidates. And so they want to get their candidates elected. And one of the methods they're using to do that is they're using an AI that was written to purge voters from voting lists.
Wow.
So and make challenges to voters. So they can literally run this thing and make challenges in swing states that were lost by small margins to hundreds of thousands of voters.
Wow.
So the idea is that then those voters would have to re-verify that their voting is legal. And of course, who are they looking for? They're not looking for their own people who are not supposed to vote. They're looking for voters who are actually really supposed to vote, but for the other side, so they can win. And I think in one of the tapes that was gotten by ProPublica, the leader said, the head of it, Ziklag, said, "We're here to win. If we need 75,000 votes to win, we'll get 150,000," when he was talking about these procedures. So they're really trying to do this. And I'm sure that there are other agencies involved from various sides of the coin that should be looking into this. And there is one other issue that we'll probably come up with in a few minutes about their status as a 501c3.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask about that. But before I actually went into the 501c3, I was curious to know if you are familiar with some of the donors.
Yes, there are some donors here that are really interesting. If you give me just a second here.
Yeah, no problem.
And this is really, these people really are bad news. Where was it? Okay.
I'll give you a moment to look that up, Jonathan. So I'm going to come back to you.
Okay.
But I was just thinking about how even though like they may have only $12 million in their coffers right now as of 2022, that's still a good amount of money to affect smaller races. So if you're looking at getting people into state legislatures where that could be more effective to voters because it's closer to home and they are
Not to mention one thing,
affecting certain laws that would be on the state level that could be influencing these 7 mountains that they actually have. But did you find some of the donors list, Jonathan?
yes, it's
Okay,
the
go ahead.
Yulin family, billionaire Yulin family. I think that's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm mispronouncing it, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Who made a fortune in office supplies? The Greens, who run Hobby Lobby, and the Wallers, who own the Jockey Apparel Corporation. These people have deep pockets. There's other people involved in this, and there are lots of people who adhere to the Seven Mountain Mandate and may or may not be involved with Ziklag, but they would be, and there are some people in office. So, those are the people who are dangerous. The other thing about state legislatures, they can have an effect on how to certify an election in their states. Because states have control of how people vote and the elections and the certification of those elections within the states. The Constitution does not give that power to Congress or to the federal government. So these local elections are very important.
Yeah, that's very true. State, even when it comes to voting and how elections are ran, even the ones that we're looking at the federal level, we got a big one coming up in November. And how the election looks as far as like where the votes go is completely based on the rules of that state. So a state that's like Georgia versus a state like Arizona can have completely different rules on how they govern their elections. So it is important to really understand, well, be aware first, and then understand how groups like the Ziklag group, who are getting funding from people like the Yulins and the Greens and the Wallers, who have like a lot of money at their disposal, can really affect the course of our entire governmental system. But since like we kind of skirted, or we're kind of hinting towards the status of the C3, the 501c3, Scott, I'm coming to you. Are you aware of some of the concerns that have been raised by some of the legal experts about Ziklag's status as a 501c3 organization?
Well, I mean, of course, the ACA is a 501c3 organization as well. And we're constantly talking about avoiding electioneering, avoiding manipulating, affecting the outcome of an election and that kind of thing. And it's a very hot topic. And I know that that many institutions, in particular religious institutions, have been pushing the edge of that envelope. They've been testing, for example, the IRS to see if the IRS will say anything. And so I know that it seems like it's a concerted effort. It seems like it's a massive concerted effort of pushing the edge of that envelope. And I think part of what they're trying to do with that is take advantage of the friendly Supreme Court that we have right now for this kind of thing. And so that might be why we're seeing this. It could be an intentional thing. It could be an unintentional thing. It could be a matter of entitlement. Maybe they feel like they have the right to do these kind of things. The thing about the 501c status is, or 501c3 status, I can never say that right. You agree to these limitations when you accept when you accept that status, and you apply for it to try to get tax breaks and so forth. But when you do that, you're promising to follow the rules, to follow these guidelines. And so what they're doing is, not only are they testing the limits, pushing the limits, testing the law as written versus the law as intended and that kind of thing. But I think it's even intentional. It's intentional provocation. And so I don't think I answered really your question at all, but I think it was related enough that we can go with it. it's frustrating as somebody who participates for, who's part of a 501c3. I said it right. 501c3 organization, to see other organizations just flaunt those limitations, and it's frustrating. But I think that's part of the intention there. I think they want to get it to in front of the Supreme Court.
No, you actually answered my question.
Okay, good. I knew that. I was testing you to see if you recognized that I answered your question. There, well, let's go. I like that one.
The teacher.
Well, the teacher
Right.
would always want to test the students, even if
Show
they're the
your work.
conductor. Yeah, I know, right? I'll show my division problem after we're done with the recording. However, but it is very important, as you mentioned, that the nonprofits is produced and is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 organization that is dedicated to the separation of church and state, or religion and government, and also making sure that we are holding up secular humanist values. Yes, I said it. Did I say it right? I'm pretty sure that the executive producer will let me know if I did or did not. Regardless, when it comes to your 501c3 status, it gets very touchy when you are dealing with elections and people who are running and things of that nature. We have certain rules that, we don't endorse candidates, right? Like as a 501c3, we will not endorse or we will not disparage candidates who happen to be running for offices, whether if it's at the highest echelon of the federal government all the way down to the dog catcher. We won't do it. And also, we are aware of making sure that even though we're maybe reporting on certain things, we're going to not necessarily involve our personal feelings per se, especially when it comes to talking about certain elections that happen to be going on at this particular time. And the reason being is because we care about the rules. But unfortunately, we just have way too many of these Christian nationalist groups that have a tendency not to really care about the rules, and they want to make sure that they are doing their darndest to actually mess up the whole thing for all of us, right? But I'm going to come to you, Eli. I saw there was some information concerning the implementation and what they want to do really with the 7 mountains. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Jonathan mentioned earlier, the 7 mountains are religion, family, education, entertainment, media, government, and business. And this is from basically the Ziklag mission statement. And the goal is ultimately to take total influence over those 7 areas of life, those 7 mountains, so that they can influence every, direct quote, in order to influence every aspect of our lives. One of their stated goals is 80% of all films become rated G or PG, which seems almost impossible to enforce, for one, but it also kind of has this very if you ever saw that Man in the High Castle show, has this very sort of dystopian where if that was reality, I'd be looking around thinking this is no, this is not real. It just doesn't, it just seems like an unrealistic goal for them to set, and that's all I can really say about it. It was one of those things that when I got there, I had to stop for a second and just kind of wonder to myself.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel you on that. Yeah, just to mention, we want everything to be G and PG. And, I have a 3-year-old who just left my room right now. And, and I'm just thinking about some of the programs that he subjects me to 24/7. It's not fair. I just want to say, help. But Jonathan, I'm coming to you. I want you to kind of wrap us up, since you went ahead and introduced the story. And I specifically want to ask you, because you did touch on this earlier when you were introducing the topic to us. Talk about Ziklag's goals of how they want to affect public education. I know that Eli kind of alluded to it, but I kind of want you to go into it a little bit more, and also talk about how the effect would be on marginalized groups like LGBTQIA plus people and other cultural issues that might come up.
Well, as you might well imagine, that there proponents of the Heritage Foundation's 2025. They want to dismantle public education and turn it into basically Bible school. And that, of course, doesn't matter whether you want your kids to be or not. They're going to make that the public school or the necessity, as they're trying to do in certain states right now, as we've seen, where the education department in certain school states are saying you must teach the Bible in school. Well, now you're just going to have the only thing you're learning in school is the Bible, which of course is going to play hell with the economy, because you won't have any skilled workers. That, if they know how to read, they only know how to read in 16th century English script. So it's like, how are they going to get the skills they need to do anything? This is not a concern of these people. They are so zealous. They feel that if they get the United States to help with Israel and bring about the end times, they don't have to think about the future, And what they don't realize, of course, is that's not going to happen. And they're just going to end up destroying the country and causing another really bad civil war, which will make the first one look like a playroom fight, a sandbox fight. This is not a good thing. These people are literally traitors, and they're hiding behind the flag by trying to say, we're patriots. We're trying to save the United States. What they're trying to do is destroy it and remake it in their own image. And this is a total threat to every one of us. LGBTQ people, of which I am one, if people didn't know, I personally would have to leave the country because I refuse to have them nullify my marriage. And I refuse to have anything to do with a country who's going that far, and unfortunately, I am too old to do much more than just get out of the way. Unfortunately, I have to leave it to other generations to do something. So I'm just saying that, this is going to hurt everybody's pocket. When this came out and a certain individual had a meeting with all the CEOs of all the major companies and banks, they walked out because they said they don't know anything about the economy. They're going to crash it, and it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. And that means that if you want to go through another depression, then become a Christian nationalist, because they're going to force one on us. They want us to be like the Amish, and they also just want a ignorant workforce who doesn't know their own rights or their own way of their own power, and not to own their own power. They want women to be subservient. They want all of these things. But, our women who've been independent since the 60s, by the way, people, they were only, I think in the 72, women were no longer literally property of their husbands. So it was like, since then, women have become independent. They've been equal in work, if not pay. Still that problem. But these things have to be solved.
It does have to be solved.
These people want to go back to the 1800s. They're not looking at pre-World War II. Right. They're looking at pre-Civil War.
Right, exactly. And we made strides since then, but it's very important for us to learn about groups like the Ziklag organization. They're well-funded, their strategies, and they're very organized. And it's important for us who happen to be in the fray to learn about them and what their things are, so that if we have to activate ourselves, that we can. And also, too, I don't want their world, because if we go to all being an Amish, I look terrible in violence. The one thing that is not terrible is watching more nonprofits. So click here.